This is Kosuke Gawa. He's your typical high school student who also happens to be a tokusatsu fanboy. One day he's walking home when he runs into Motoko, a girl who at first glance seems to be just as ordinary as he is. At least until she kicks a guy into a car. It's through this encounter that the two start to become friends, and Kosuke Gawa discovers some of the other interesting characters in Motoko's life. As he begins to question the safety and stability of his new friend, the mugger she kicked earlier returns and refuses to take no for an answer. It's here that we learn her little secret. The people Kosuke Gawa met earlier were in fact Motoko's split personalities. See, when she was young, Motoko was raised by her tough martial artist parents, an angry karate expert, a sword fighter, a master of jujitsu, a Muay Thai fighter, a perverted Chinese... wait, no, just the first three. And this parentage and tough training led to her splitting off into several personalities. So it looks like this newfound friendship will be more complicated than Kosuke Gawa thought it would. Looking back on this series is one thought that kept reoccurring. This is a lot like a certain other manga I read, isn't it? The martial arts, the fan service, and the attention to detail in both are extremely similar. Of course, there are other series that mix martial arts and fan service, but none of them compare in the same way that these two manga do. So we're pitting these two fighters against each other and seeing who still looks pretty afterwards. Let's get into our other manga for today. Kenichi started off life as your typical protagonist. He had few friends, no respect, and got judo flipped by random passers-by. So one day he decided to try and earn some respect by joining the local karate club. Surely they would welcome him in and teach him how to stand up for himself. Guess not. Luckily, he soon discovers that this passerby is in fact a trained martial artist named Furinji Miyu. She teaches him a few self-defense moves to help against the bullies, only for even bigger bullies to show up. So she turns to her housemates, who are not aspects of her personality, but a group of master-class martial artists known as Ryo Zanpaku. From Miyu's recommendation, they take him up as their disciple, letting him grow strong enough to fight tougher and tougher bullies. And the bullies beyond that. And the bullies beyond that, and so forth. First thing I'd like to mention is the plot of both series. Both are primarily about fighting, yes, but the way they produce these fights are done very differently. Kenichi is the much simpler of the two, starting out with a few harassing bullies, followed by a gang of delinquents, and followed by a worldwide organization of fighters. Everything stems from a difference in ideology between the two sides, and that difference is usually, my way of martial arts is better than yours. There are occasionally other excuses for fighting, but those are few and far between. Change 123, on the other hand, has a greater variety of opponents who are fought for many different reasons. Sometimes Hifumi would be fighting other martial artists who want to learn about her unique method of fighting, and sometimes you'd be in a forest fighting commandos trained to kill on sight. But the thing is, I still think Kenichi does a better job at making the fights interesting. When the story really tries, it makes you care about the relationship between combatants and how the fight will end up. It takes the time to build the antagonists until you generally want to see them get punched in the face a few times. This is the problem with Change 123, where it's difficult to care about most of the enemies. The commandos I mentioned? They assaulted a friend of the heroes, and the heroes wanted to drag one back to apologize, so they risked their lives just to retrieve him. It's difficult to get invested when the motives behind the fighting are that simple. This brings us to the characters. Both series have an impressive share of good characters, with quite a bit of variation to them, but I don't think either uses them to their full potential. Kenichi has a very large cast, while Change 123 is a small one, but both have difficulty keeping most of the characters relevant beyond their introduction. In Kenichi, this has a lot to do with how the story arcs work, because each one deals with only a small number of characters, often 3 or 4, and with a cast of several dozen people, you'll be lucky if you see your favorite every 2 or 3 arcs, and even luckier if they actually get to do anything. Change 123 manages to keep most of the cast around at least, but still has the problem where it feels like they're just hanging around in the background, occasionally tagged in to fight. There are usually some good moments when they're first introduced, but afterwards they struggle to find any plot they can grab onto. Still, if you're into dynamic characters, Change 123 should keep you interested with the main duo alone. Kosuke Gawa makes for an interesting main character, and Motoko's personalities all play off of him rather well. Hell, it even provides a surprisingly well-done romantic subplot later on. Compare the romance subplot of Kenichi, which would have been well done if not for the fact that after 400 chapters, you know that it's never going anywhere. Well, now it's time we got to the real meat of these two series. Not that meat! We'll get to that in a minute. No, I'm talking about the combat. We have two martial arts series here, so if there's one thing they should be good at, it's the fighting, right? Luckily, yes, the combat is easily the best thing about both manga. It's one of the big reasons I put the two together, as their styles are very similar. There's a high attention to detail put into the martial arts, to the point where I was able to recognize a few real-life techniques. The combat frequently gets rather brutal, and it makes the action feel more realistic when a small part of you hurts when someone gets punched in the stomach. Where the theories differ is in how realistic they get. They both use real-life martial arts concepts and styles, but Change 123 takes that realism to other concepts, such as blood loss and how to operate certain weapons, while Kenichi goes in a more shonen direction. Let me put it like this. In Change 123, there's a character that fights with their sharpened fingernails specifically to make the opponent pass out from loss of blood. In Kenichi, a character once uses a wooden spoon as a bladed weapon. A ranged bladed weapon. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to condemn either approach. Both series know exactly how they want to portray the fighting, and they do their best to perfect it. And I can easily say that they both succeeded at what they set out to do. Well, now it's time we talk about what I'm sure many of you know these series best for. The fan service. And boy, do these series love their fan service. There's rarely a time where they don't take the opportunity to tear up the girls' clothing, have a good few pages of them bathing, or, in one bizarre instance, have them dress up in ridiculous cosplay for a student film. It's all over the place in both manga, and it's the biggest hurdle you'll have to get past if you want to start reading them. That being said, for those who want this sort of thing in their stories, you should be aware that they both treat it very differently. See, there's good fanservice and bad fanservice, which is like the difference between being naked in a sauna and being naked in a grocery store. Now, Change 123 has mostly good fanservice. Ignoring the scale of it for a second, it's usually kept away from the more dramatic moments, and doesn't rely as much on camera angles or weird contortions. It's about as tasteful as a woman losing her top can be in a martial arts series. And while there are moments where it gets silly, I could always tell myself, hey, at least it isn't Kenichi. There is no excuse for what Kenichi does. It's all over the place, there's almost never a decent excuse for it, and it ruins otherwise dramatic scenes. Not to mention the character models. Look at this! I have to use sensor bars and she's fully clothed. That is how tight that outfit is. Miu, word of advice. One size fits all is not a challenge. This gets so ridiculous and stupid that I honestly think the series would be better off if they just had the girls take their tops off before every fight. You know, get it out of the way. Hell, that's what Change 123 sometimes does. They don't dwell on it, and it makes it a lot better. And that's a subtlety Kenichi will probably never understand. So, in the end, how do these series stack up? Well, the over-sexualization of Kenichi is still just one aspect of the series. It doesn't change the fact that as an action manga, Kenichi really does a great job capturing the spirit and fierce nature of the combat. At its best, the fight scenes are some of the most thrilling I've seen in quite a while. That's just it, though. It isn't always like that, and with roughly 450 chapters already out, you would expect there to be so much more. That's part of what makes Change 123 stand out. It provides the same intense action and achieves a well-rounded story in a quarter of the length. So even though it never quite reaches the same level as Kenichi at its best, it's of a higher quality overall and provides a greater sense of closure. As you probably guessed, these two series are all about the martial arts, and it won't disappoint those looking for teenagers kicking the shit out of each other. Of course, they're also all about fan service, but only Change 123 really does it properly. In terms of presentation, Kenichi is a bit more childish and Change more adult, both in terms of overall themes and the way the action is presented. They also have very different running times, with all that entails, Kenichi being more enduring, Change being more conclusive. And Change also has a good romance element to it, so it can appeal to anyone who found it lacking in most shonen. Now, if you don't like the kind of sex appeal of these kinds of series, you really shouldn't be going near either manga, even if one does do it better. It also isn't the place to go for more complex cast dynamics, because aside from a few main characters, there is as much depth as there could be. As of right now, neither of these manga have been released in North America, at least not from what I've heard. Kenichi, however, received an anime adaptation that was released here by Funimation. It does a fairly good job at adapting the first 143 chapters, or 16 volumes, of the manga. The creator, Shunmatsu Ena, recently produced and directed the anime movie Waza no Tabibito, though since it has yet to be released on DVD, I can't tell you how it was. Change 123 concluded in mid-2010, but I have yet to find anything else the writer or artist I've worked on before or since. I'll keep you posted if I find anything. So, that was Kenichi and Change 123. Now that the review is over, though, I can't help but wonder what would happen if Kenichi and Hifumi actually did get into a fight. Would three protagonists triumph over one, or would Kenichi's first determination— oh, that's right, I almost forgot. Yeah, now I want to see them punch him a lot more for some reason.